Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first talk of the day for this room. And this morning we have Darshan Gajara with us. He's gonna teach us how to break down the design silos. So,
Awesome, thanks a lot.
enjoy.
Hello and welcome everyone to my talk about breaking down design silos. Today I'm going to tell you a story about a startup that was started from a very small town in Germany by two ambitious engineers. The town is called Gießen. I don't expect any of you to know this name, it's not that popular. It's a town near Frankfurt. But today this startup has grown to a sizable margin now, and it's at Series B stage. We have a decent annual recurring revenue, and there are about 80 people. I'll tell you a little more about the startup, and I'll tell you how we scale to this size with the help of design, and how we build the culture of design inside the company. But it would be very rude of me if I did not introduce myself before starting the talk. So let me give you some context. My name is Darshan Gajara. I put a little more emphasis on the last name because I understand that it's Germany and people would usually pronounce it as Gajara, but that's not the case. But you can butcher it. I don't mind. I love my German friend. I'm a designer and maker living in Berlin. I've been in Berlin for about 4 years now. It was quite an unfortunate time when I moved to Berlin from Mumbai. It was right in the beginning of the pandemic. So when I moved here for the 1.5 year of my early journey, things were on a shutdown. Berlin was also closed, and I couldn't really explore the city, but I took that as an advantage. I started exploring Berlin locally, and Berlin has a lot of green spaces. I don't understand the complaint that a lot of people have that Berlin is not green enough. It is, maybe not as green as Munich or Bavaria, but it is green enough. And there are a lot of lakes and hikes. And you know this thing that whenever you travel or move to a place, you're always looking to travel outside. You never really take the time to travel to the place that you actually are in. So I just took this opportunity and it was quite nice. Also, I got married during the pandemic, so I have some happy memories of that. I currently head design at Highcraft. I'll tell you a little more about Highcraft because without the backstory, the talk would be very incomplete. I also have a side project called as Product Disrupt. It's a place where I curate design resources, or really any resources that are available for free on the internet, and some design inspiration with the goal of helping fellow designers and makers to build their own digital products or to even get started in their design journey. I also teach at Coho, which used to be called On Deck. Some of you might be familiar with it. It is a unique cohort-based course program. They teach a lot of different functions, but I joined them initially as a cohort member, but later I became a design partner over there. So I teach some modules on design leadership there. And when I'm not doing all of this, I take my time to travel. When I'm traveling, I try to take some pictures. I have some passion for photography as well. And I like to tell stories. So I'm always looking for this unusual experiences. What's on the menu for today? Not the food menu. I wouldn't know about that, but the menu of my talk. We will look at how Highcraft was when I started at Highcraft. Then we are also going to look at the challenges that designers usually face at early stage startups. And then we will look into the meat or the juicy part of the talk, which is how you break down silos with collaboration. We will then look at the current state of things, so we will come full circle. And then we will open it up for questions. So you can already start thinking about the challenges that you are facing as a designer, as an engineer, as a product manager when you started at early stage startups. And I really want to just share my personal experience working through this turbulent times of startups. And I've also talked to a lot of my peers who have been in similar journeys, and I have collected some notes and notes from their experiences. So I just want to share that with you. And the idea is that so you can take some inspiration from it. Maybe you can apply the same to your journey. That is the whole idea of the talk. So without any further ado, let's get started. Let me give you a little backstory about HighGraph, and let me just tell you what HighGraph really is. So HighGraph used to be called Graph CMS. For people who live in Berlin, and some of them might have heard about it. It started as a headless CMS startup. It was GraphQL native. A headless CMS is essentially a content platform which allows you to deliver and scale your content. A lot of hobby engineers who just like to work on side projects, they also use this product because we have a generous community plan. But mostly the people or the companies which have a lot of content work to do, that is when they get the real benefit of it. You can think of something like a Netflix. When you watch Netflix, you might be watching it on your tablet, you might be watching it on your mobile phone or even your desktop, and you don't really care what the device is, right? The content is still going to be the same no matter where you watch it. And usually companies like this, they use a platform. Yeah, you can come. So usually larger companies like this, they use a platform like ours so that they can have all the content inside one system, and then they can just use a GraphQL API to fetch all of that content. It's quite a technical product. I'm not going to go too much into the details about it. But at some point, we also started extending the capabilities of our platform. So it was not just a headless CMS then. We also opened it up with remote sources, which essentially just allows you to source the content from anywhere. So originally, a headless CMS allows you to fetch the content on any front end, no matter what the stack is. But later, we also started getting content from any system that you have. It can also be our competitor headless CMSs. It doesn't matter. As long as they give us the API, we can get that content, and we can then show that content on any of the devices that you have. So that's why we needed a rebrand, because Graph CMS was too much of a limitation. People would usually think of Graph CMS as a CMS. But now we are trying to pioneer in this industry of content federation, and that's why we rebranded to HighGraph. When I joined HighGraph, it was June 2020, so it was still the time of pandemic. The team was just about 22 people, a distributed team. It has been a remote team right from the get-go. It was not forced due to pandemic. It was just started like that. And you can imagine when two ambitious engineers working together in Gießen, they're not going to find enough good people to work with in the local area, right? So they obviously started working with people from any part of the world. We had some engineers from India, from Africa, and we also had a lot of people in the commercial org. At that time, engineers were building the product, and people in the commercial org, so people in sales and marketing, they were trying to sell the product. As simple as that. At that time, we had a 2.6 million of seed funding, which was just enough to get us started. And when I joined the company, I was the first designer on the team, which means there was no design function inside the company. As I mentioned, only engineers and people in the commercial org. So it was quite an exciting and challenging time to join. And we had 0 product managers at that time. I think it's also because early stage companies, they cannot really afford a lot of management. They just need people who can just build. And now let's look at the challenges that designers face at early stage startups. Number one challenge, the design just did not exist. Because when you are the first designer to join, of course, there's not a culture of design. The design function isn't there. And also, I think I forgot what I wanted to say. It will come to me, no worries. Yeah. So there was no culture of design. And because these people working in the company, they were not used to working with designers. Some of them did have the experience working with designers because they had worked at other companies, but some of them, they were quite new in the industry. Our startup founders, they also did not have much experience. Some engineers that we have on the team, they were also quite fresh. So a lot of people just did not really know how to work with design. And that also meant that we did not really have any visibility on design. So when I joined the company, my first thing was to create more visibility and transparency in the company. And at the time, Figma wasn't that popular. Now it's a rocket ship unicorn. It's one of the biggest and fastest growing startups in the history of all startups, really. But at that time, Sketch was still something that people were using. And I had used Figma on some of my personal projects, did not use it professionally. But of course, I could see the potential, and slowly many people were adopting it. And because my idea was to create more visibility and transparency, Figma is just this beautiful tool where you can get everyone on the files that you're working on. You can work simultaneously. They can also see what's happening inside the company. So I started using Figma, and I set up a system of how we were using Figma inside the company. I'll tell you a little more about the system, but for now, it was just this. As people were not familiar with the tool, but I wanted them to collaborate. I wanted them to provide me the feedback. So I did a workshop for all the people inside the company. At the time, it was just 22 people, so it was not a lot of people, but they were all very keen on learning this. And this was a two-part workshop that I conducted, where in one part, I just gave them the basics of how the tool really works. So how the canvas looks like, how do you do some basic editing, how do you really access the file. And then in the second session, I took an event poster that we had, and I asked all of them to recreate the poster with whatever that I taught them. And people got very creative. I have not taken the whole screenshot. There were very interesting things that they created over there, which I cannot share here. But when you give freedom to the people, they get really creative. And it's really amazing to see how they take keen interest in things. The second challenge, it's very obvious. I think this challenge never really goes away, even when you start getting bigger, especially in the early days of getting bigger when you're scaling. You, of course, always have this problem of chaos and ambiguity. But good designers, they usually thrive in this kind of situations, because a job of a designer is to also take a lot of ambiguity that's happening around them and bring a clarity from that. But I can understand that this is maybe not for everyone. A lot of people, they thrive on clarity. When you tell them the problem that you have, what you're trying to achieve, it becomes very easy for them, and they would kind of be like a mercenary, and they can get the job done. But that is not the case in a lot of startups, unfortunately. And there's a constant context switching happening at all the time. So it becomes very hard to really keep a track of things. So you can lose your mind, you can become insane. And also you are expected to really do a lot of things in a startup. So you might be expected to do user interface design, user experience design. That is what a product designer would do. I was hired as a product designer. So that is by definition my job. But then also you're expected to do discovery and research work, user testing and quality assurance. So usually a product manager would still do that. But then there are also other people like, usually a product designer would still do that. But then there are also people like product managers and user research specialists. They help you out with some of these things. But when you don't have them, it's usually on you to do that. And then, of course, from time to time, you also need to help out with brand and marketing. We had people in our marketing team at that time. Our VP of marketing, he was a very collaborative person. I had a very nice rapport working with him. And he was very open to doing a lot of things. So usually I needed to start with something, and then he would go really above and beyond and take some of my designs, create some mood boards for me, create the wireframe, so that it just makes it easier for me to do the work. But you still need to do that. And then you're also expected to do the product management work. So usually the people who are the lead on the projects, they do the project management work as well. which means that you are expected to be a jack of all trades, but not master of none. You are expected to be master of some. So you are expected to be this T-shaped person where you have one specialization. So in my case, it was product design. And then you're also expected to do other things that a designer can do or should do. And there's always this evergreen debate about should designers code, should coders design. I don't really care much about the debate. I think when you really need something, you need to get out of your way and you need to do a lot of things. And today, there's actually the barrier between design, code, product management is it's minuscule. A lot of the tools that we use now, they just make it very easy to have that seamless collaboration. So I think when it's required for you to do something, you should do it. The other challenge, searching for design feedback. So at times in a startup, it can feel like you're searching for something that just doesn't exist. It is very hard to really get any feedback when you do the work. And when you don't get the feedback, it's also very hard to really know if you're going in the right direction, if you need to course correct, or what really you need to do. But internally, there are ways that you can resolve this. So when you collaborate with people inside your company, they all have different expertise. If it's an engineer, they understand things more technically, logically. Product managers, they see things from a different perspective. They can connect the business to the product that you're creating. At that time, I was spending a lot of time with our CEO, who had a little bit of experience in product and engineering, and also our customer support guy. So he was actually our everything guy. He started in the company as an engineer, then started helping out with customer support. Now he's a full-time product manager. And at one point, he even lended some money to the company when the company was in dire need of it. So we had mostly this three people, me, our CEO, our customer support, and our everything guy. And I used to get a lot of the feedback from them. They were helping me out. So these are the cross-functional partners that you can always find. They can give you feedback internally. You can also talk to the users, the customers. Luckily, we have a very active Slack community because we give a generous free plan. A lot of people, they use our product passionately, and they're usually ready to help you out, give you some early feedback. Sometimes even they're more excited that you show them something which is not fully baked, and they can have their opinions. So you can do that internally, but then the problem is you might not get a lot of feedback on your hard skills, especially if you're early in your career. So lucky with me that I had a decade of experience before I joined HighGraph. So I had built some intuition over the period of time. So it wasn't that difficult for me. But then if you are still early in your career, it becomes very hard because you need that feedback from a designer, from a design team on your hard skills, so you can improve on those skills. And that just doesn't exist when you don't have anyone inside the company who has that expertise. So for that, I started looking externally, and you can always leverage other design communities that you're part of, or mentor and peer groups. So in the beginning, I mentioned that I joined Coho. My idea to join Coho was really to connect with people who are on a leadership journey. So people maybe who are transitioning from an IC role to a leadership role. I did not have the first-hand experience of it. I'd done that a little bit here and there in my experience working as a consultant. But I wanted to connect with people who are on the similar journey, maybe a step ahead or maybe a step behind. And usually you can learn a lot more from them than you would learn from an expert who has been in the industry for 20, 25 years. Sometimes they are not even relevant. So that was one of the main goals for me. And you can always leverage this mentors and peer group. And you might ask that if you're starting out and you don't have those many connections, I'm not really telling you to build a brand on social media and get a lot of followers and then ask them. Then they are just audience. In order to join a community or to find peers, you don't really need to be very popular or celebrity to do that. Anybody can do that. And the final challenge, doing more with less. This is a constant challenge. Startups are always expected to bite more than they can chew. You always want more with the limited resources that you have. And I think it's very hard to really have a proper resolution for this. A lot of times I tell people to brutally prioritize. You're going to have 10 things that you need to work on at any given point of time. And of course, just because you work in a startup doesn't mean that you have more hours in the day than any other normal person, right? So you still need to be careful about how you invest your time. And it's very common that one day you might be working on a feature that is strategically very relevant to the company, but then you might have one enterprise customer who is really paying you a lot of money and most of your ARR is coming from them. They might ask you to develop a certain feature which is important for them. There's no way that you can just say no to them, even though it might not be the right thing to scale. But at that time, you still want to do that, right? So this kind of things can always happen. And what you really do is you just have to prioritize. You have to make sure the work that you do gives you the highest ROI. It's not that easy. You're always going to have some setbacks, but you're always going to learn from your experiences. So enough about the challenges. I tried to give you some resolutions as well. It was really what I tried at the company and which worked out for us. But now let's look at how do you really break the design silos with collaboration. So I want to just give you some practical tips, some lessons that I would want you to take away from this talk. And let's get into it. Number one is bring them along on the journey. What I mean by this, when you are working with people and you're a designer, a lot of times what happens is, or maybe this was the old way of working, if you just give them the final design and you ask them to make a decision, they just really have two options, right? One, they're going to love what you have created, and then everything is happy, rainbows and sunshine, and you go home happily. Or if they don't like something, they're going to disapprove it, and then you're back to drawing board, you spend a lot of time, and you're going to hate your job. But that is the practice of just not working together. So instead of making them a decision maker, you try to make them a participant, which means you share the work early with them, you share it often, and then you get feedback from them and you iterate on that. And when people are passionate about something, they get very involved. I've had so many times in my time at HighGraph that I might not be very interested working on a feature, but there would be this one engineer who really wanted it, and he would just go on, and he would want to give me all the feedback. And then, of course, he's leading the charge. And that's great because now they have already become a participant. So when we come to a solution at the end, it's not me who is presenting the solution and the other person making a decision. They have been the participant. We really know where we are going with this. And also, if you work in silos, sometimes you might end up working on something that nobody wants or nobody is expecting. And if people can have visibility on that, they can course correct, they can nudge you in the right direction. So I think it's just a better recipe for success. You have to get out of the mindset of service. So you're not an agency or you're not a freelancer working with them, right? You're like a full-time member working with the team. So you really want to collaborate, and you don't want to just have this service-oriented mindset. You are rather trying to build a partnership. And then, of course, a lot of times, these are the people who are actually going to fight for you, or these are the people who are going to vouch for your ideas because they have been on the journey. It's not a surprise for them when it comes to the end of it. And this is why I always say that when you are tasked to work on something, don't just disappear. Keep sharing the work. I personally believe this can be spicy opinion, but don't cancel me on Twitter for this, or X. So I believe that if a designer is spending more than a day or 2 days, 2 days would be when I give them a little bit of liberty. But if they're spending more than 2 days not sharing any of the work, then they're probably doing something wrong. Another tip is to identify your champions. Now, with this, I want to tell you a little story about the concept of identifying your champions. So I learned this concept through stand-up comedy. So there's a little performer in me who dreams of performing on the stage someday, making people laugh, and that's why I try to read a lot or try to look at the videos that stand-up comedians are creating, and especially what happens behind the scenes. So I had watched this one video series, or there was this one episode from that series where they were talking about the shows that they used to perform with at corporates, bigger corporates. So usually what happens is stand-up comedians are always booked for corporate shows. And when it's a corporate show, it's the company who is booking a corporate show, not the people. So what really happens is a lot of times these people are not interested in what the stand-up comedian has to say. And really the whole chemistry over here is this guy trying to speak. And if the audience listens carefully, that is when they really laugh. But they're not interested in that. They are not really paid from their pocket. They are more interested in the food and the booze that they're going to get after the show. So what the stand-up comedians usually do is they try to identify some champions in the audience. So no matter how dry the show is, you would still have 2 or 3 people who would have some hysterical laughs, or they are just being a little more attentive. I can see that you're enjoying some of my jokes, so that's really amazing. So maybe you are my champion in this talk. And when they notice that, they try to focus all of their energy on making them laugh, or they try to put them in spotlight. And what that does is that laughter is infectious. When you see some people having fun, the other people also start to take notice, and slowly you would see that the whole room is chiming in. And that is how stand-up comedians try to make a successful show out of something that was going to be a disaster. And I try to just apply that same concept in my work as well. So in a startup, when you don't have other designers, but there are also going to be this few passionate people, like I mentioned, some engineers who are really passionate about that feature, they can be your champions. They are really going to take a lot of interest in their work. And when you find those champions, remember that they are precious. So let them know that you appreciate the interest that they're taking in your work and the feedback that they're providing. And that is really going to help you to create that culture of collaboration. When you have something, share things early with them. Give them an inside look. They would feel that they are contributing. And then, of course, you build this partnership, and it slowly gets spreads over, and other people also get interested. Other tip is building systems that work in your absence. A constant annoying problem that I used to have, that when I was just a team of just one person working on the team, people a lot of times, they are just asking me questions when they are not able to find something. So it's not even about them really needing something, but them just not being able to find something somewhere in Figma or somewhere in other files. And if I'm on an absence leave, if I'm spending a vacation, and they cannot really find something, they can't do much about it. So I might have created some templates and things might have already been there, but if they cannot really find it, it's just not worth it, right? So that's when I realized that I need to build systems that scale itself, and people can find their ways around the things. And that is just going to make my job a little bit easier. So I try to apply that systematic thinking in a lot of different work that I do. So number one was this, again, the Figma system that I created. So I created this whole system of how you organize files and projects inside Figma. Figma has a nice organization structure. So in our org, we have different teams, team for product design, for marketing design. Inside product design, we have projects for features. This is where people really can find all the feature work that's happening. And then I also created this custom thumbnail or cover where you can read the name of the feature. You can look at the avatars, and that would tell you who are the owners, people working on that. So when you have questions, you can always reach out to them. The timeline, when we started working on the project and when it got shipped. And then there's also status. It tells you if the project is in discovery mode, or we are designing it, we are developing it, shipping it. So all the status is also going to clearly communicate. what you can expect out of that. And then as the thing scales and you have a numerous number of files, it is just going to make it easier for you to really look into that. And once you open the file, there is also a system there about how we organize things on different pages. And I've also written quite an elaborate article on how we organize our files and projects. It's there on our blog. If you're interested, I can also share the link later. So this made it really easy for people to find things. We have a design wiki. Because we are a remote company, we work asynchronously. It's very important that we document things, and especially when the team scales, this kind of things, they come up more often. So in Notion, we try to do a lot of our documentation, and we have created this design wiki where you can find all the things related to our design guild, which is our weekly meeting, our intro to our teams, our retrospective, motion system, design system. And there are also other things like hiring templates and onboarding and all those things. So when people have questions about design, they can of course reach out to me or post in our Slack, but they can also find most of the things here directly. And then this is another example of a system, which is a design system, nothing fancy, but design system is essentially a collection of components, which makes it easier for us to do our job and to create new files or create new pages out of the pre-existing components that we have. Makes it easier. So I try to apply the systematic thinking. And this is actually the final tip that I have, which is asking for help. In a startup, you can really use all the help that you can get. You're always going to be tasked with a lot of things that you don't have the capacity to do. And asking for help, there's no shame in that. There are many ways that you can ask for help. You can summon these champions from time to time. So there was a time when we had a few product managers in the company and just 2 designers. So there was 1 full-time product designer and me, which was like part-time because I was also doing management. And they had a lot of needs. They wanted to design a lot of features simultaneously. That's what product managers do. When they join a company, they create a lot of work. And but they were very happy or willing to support with whatever they could. So I organized a workshop for them called Design for PMs. I gave them an understanding of how we have created all the systems and how they can use the system to create some of the pages or to create some user flows, to create some wireframes, which just makes it easier to do that collaboration. So from time to time, you can also do that. And then, of course, you can also turn to your communities and you can ask people about the questions that you have, the feedback that you want. You can hire freelancers, agencies, whatever it takes. That is all about the tips. Let's look at the current state of things. So this is October 2023 today. We are now a distributed team of 77. As I speak, there might be 1 or 2 more people joining the company. We are still distributed, so we still have people really from all over the world. We have now raised 44 million total in funding, with 2 rounds of funding after I joined Series A and Series B. We have a design team of 6. It's a small but mighty team. We have different skill sets on the team now. There are product designers, design system designer, motion graphics designer, brand designer. So whenever we really need anything, we can always, within the team, we can work out. And we also rebranded to iGraph from Graph CMS with the launch of countless features. And also we were able to increase our annual recurring revenue, and that allowed us to build the team and scale the startup to the stage that we are at. And with that, we are also hiring. So we are hiring more people now, mostly engineers. There's a design position as well. Don't think we are hiring any product managers now, but you feel free to go on this link. And if you have any questions, let me know. And with that, das ist alles. I'm working on my German. Thanks a lot. I'll open it up for questions now. Anything that you could relate with, or you had any challenges at your startups when you were early in your career? Feel free to ask anything.
I actually could very much relate to the thing that you said. If a designer is not showing anything after 1 or 2 days, maybe it's not working right. So I had the same situation in a project of mine, and we had, unfortunately, just one designer, and we had to wait for him, of course, for some front-end projects. And it was quite uncomfortable sometimes where 1 week passed, 2 weeks passed, and nothing was coming back to us. And that was, of course, an uncomfortable situation. We don't know what he's doing. He was in another team. We could not communicate with him directly. So how would you solve this? So how would you push him to be more, because also he cannot maybe join our daily every day to just show us what he has done every day.
Yeah, very relatable. I could also not join a lot of the daily meetings because if I spend a lot of time in the meetings, I cannot do the work. But I think like if you really have to ask what is the issue here. Is it the issue about them not understanding the value of sharing work early? In that case, we have to show them examples of how it benefits you, how it benefits the company, how other people have benefited from it. And people are usually open to it. When they see how it's already working for others, they would want to implement something like that in their way of working as well. But if it's a challenge of them having too much work and then it feels like too much to share things and then get feedback and constantly be in this phase where they have to rework things, but because they're a startup, they also want to ship things faster. That can also be the case. So it's mostly us trying to understand what the real problem is. But I think it's also a lot of times on the designer. We have had this way of working for a long time when people were working on things in silos. The Figma even changed the game and it made things more visible. So now people work in a very different way. I think for some people it's also a mental block. They still cannot cope up with the fact that when they are working on something, there are other people watching over them. And I think it's just a question that you need to ask and then address it. But showing the examples of how it really works for others, or how the best teams really do it, that's aspirational. I think that helps.
So I, as a developer, should be more propositive and go more towards the designer.
I think you actually are in the best position to really propose this, because as a developer, you can really just tell them what challenges you face or why, because they don't share a lot of work, you don't really know what's happening, why it's harmful for your work. And when you just bring out those challenges, a lot of times people like when you just throw problems at them and then they are tasked to find solutions. You can still nudge them, but if you're not being too prescriptive, then I think people take it more positively. So you surfacing those challenges is like a great way for someone to think about it. And then, of course, maybe you can just send a link to this talk and other places as well where how people have benefited from.
I would definitely do that.
Amazing. Yes, please.
Quick question. So now that you have 6 designers, how do you organize? Is it like squads?
Yeah.
Or how is it horizontal?
Yeah, so we have a cross-functional product team structure, nothing fancy, like how most of the startups do it. So in a product team, there's one product designer who is the responsible or the owner of that product team. So they do the end-to-end work. There's a product manager and then some engineers. Based on what they really do, what kind of persona that they are tackling, we would have front-end engineers, back-end engineers, but what they really need. And the idea is so that these teams can work independently. They should not have a lot of dependency on other teams. So this is for the product designers. And then for the brand designer and our motion graphics designer, they work very closely with the marketing team because on a day-to-day basis, they're mostly doing the work that our marketing team really needs. So they are these two designers, they join their regular meetings and planning meetings, cycle review, and all those things. A motion graphics role is a little bit of a specialist role because a motion graphics designer just doesn't help it just not only helps the marketing team, but also from time to time when we need animations in product or we need to do some prototyping or we have created a feature and now we want to market that, but this person also needs to understand what the feature is inside the product. So they will also collaborate with product designers. So that also happens. We try to create an environment or we try to have a lot of this spaces where they are encouraged to share things and work collaboratively. Our weekly meeting that I talked about, it helps us in that. We document the things that we did in the last week and what we are planning to do this week. And we also share that with the company. So that gives people an eye on what you're doing, so they can identify opportunities where you can possibly collaborate. So to answer your question in short again, we really put them in the places where they would be most required. So we put them in cross-functional teams. Yes.
Thank you for your talk, first of all. And I've been like quite early user for Craft CMS, and what I really liked was the communication about the roadmap. There was like in the beginning of the channel, and right in the middle of the night, and CEO Michael was always responding for answers of questions. Now the Slack channel has grown quite a lot. It's like I think 6,000, 8,000 users. How do you manage the feedback? Creating the design or something like that?
Yeah.
To get tons of messages currently.
Yeah.
You really go over all the messages and read everything that.
So it's very overwhelming. I think because you have been an early user, you must have seen this. Michael would be very happy to hear this. He's very active. He's not just very active outside where he's always engaging with people, users and customers, but also very active internally. He would even give me feedback on that one pixel that is missing in the design. Sometimes it can get annoying, but I also like that because that shows that somebody is very passionate about it. And we have different ways of collecting feedback. Now that the company is grown, there are people who are specifically in charge of some of these things. So a lot of feedback that comes from the Slack community. We have developer advocates and solutions architect. So they are the ones who are responsible to really take that messages and relay it to the team, also reply to those people, give them answers. So that, and we are also lucky that there are some community users who also just feel so passionate. They also come across some problems. If the other person would ask it, they would be very happy to just chime in and share their expertise there. And that is really the beauty of the community. To a point that some people even put that little wording status in their Slack saying that I'm not a high graph employee. I'm just a regular user like you. I'm just helping you. Because some people thought that they were actually employees. So that happens. And then there are other ways of getting user feedback or feedback on features that we should work on. So that feedback board that you were referring to, unfortunately, we don't use it that often. But then we talk to our customers. So we have customer success managers who are usually the bridge. They relay a lot of feedback. Sometimes product managers also do that. And then when we need feedback specifically on something, we try to run some campaigns, like user research campaigns. So there's a system that we have created for that as well. Then, for example, if we want to get feedback on editor experience, we would look into our database. We'll try to identify people who do a lot of editor experience operations. So they work with our content editor. Then we try to take those personas and we try to reach out to them. Some people would agree to get on the call, and then we get some specific feedback for them. But we also do continuous discovery, which means we still keep on talking to people without a specific agenda, just hearing what they're really doing and the problems that they're facing or how they're really utilizing the product gives us a lot of ideas of how we can really innovate. Because you can ask your users about the challenges that they're facing, but if you are just ask them about what you want to build, that's, I think, a recipe for a disaster. You're never going to innovate. People will tell you.
Like a champion database.
Yeah, we have created that champion database. It's called user CRM. So we created in Notion. It was again like a DIY thing, where we opened up a form. We sent it out in different marketing channels. People filled it out, showing their interest of being happy to be contacted to provide this feedback. So from time to time, we also reach out to those champions, and we also sometimes send them some swag as a token of appreciation. And that's great for marketing as well. When we send them the swag, they are more happy. They would again post that on social media. So marketing benefits from it. We benefit from it. But that's just how we try to do it.
Thank you very much for the talk.
Thank you.